We'll now proceed with Jamila Larson, Executive Director and co-founder of the Homeless Children's Playtime Project.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Playtime Project is honored to be here today to offer our support as we face this unprecedented family homeless crisis in our city. As you know, the Playtime Project partners with shelters to provide age-appropriate educational and therapeutic programming to 600 children a year in 5 shelters and housing programs. We do not receive nor do we seek city funding. We rely on about 500 volunteers a year to run our 13 weekly programs for infants through teens. We do everything from helping babies get bathtubs to teenagers into college and everything in between. Like everyone here, our organization is very concerned about the growing numbers of children and families seeking shelter this winter, and we know firsthand the effects it has on the children that we serve. The time for blame is really over. We know what the problem is, and we need to decide as a community if we are actually willing to solve what I believe is a very solvable problem. The same day we are reading headlines about record family homelessness in our city, we're reading headlines about record city surplus, now at $321 million. We know the homeless crisis is a symptom of the poverty crisis. We know there's a direct connection between glooming new development and the resulting gentrification with the dramatic loss of affordable housing. While the number of high-cost apartments in D.C. has more than tripled in the last decade, the lowest income 40% of D.C. households has not seen the same increase in income. There's a math problem and a priorities problem in our city that cannot be solved by DHS or any one agency. And just like no one agency can solve this problem, no one program can be the only solution. Take rapid rehousing, for example. This is an important and popular tool designed for families who can afford market rate rent after 4 months of rental assistance. Families are told it can be extended for up to a year, but many families are not told it could actually be extended to 2 years, which may make it more palatable for some of them if they knew that. Understandably, most landlords aren't comfortable renting to someone without a job and a steady income and a subsidy that could run out at any time. The bottom line is we know that most families earning just TANF or minimum wage simply cannot afford market rate rent. If we tell ourselves anything different, we're just asking for families to continue to cycle back through the homeless service system, as 40% of families in shelter have been there before. The typical low-income renter already spends 2/3 of their income on rent, and the so-called housing wage is $25 an hour in this city. So a single parent who has not yet finished high school or held a steady job is no match for these statistics with just a light touch investment. Nearly half of TANF families are living doubled up, which technically meets the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness already. We're talking about babies cutting their first teeth while sleeping on the floor of a loud and crowded apartment, kids learning how to read while sleeping on a different couch each night on the run from a father threatening to kill their mother, young people studying for the SATs from their family's car. These are not overly dramatic stories. We have thousands of children and their families who are really suffering like this every day in our community. Living doubled up on one hand is a temporary solution as old as time, but it can also be a very real safety issue. I have handled numerous cases as a social worker dealing with children being sexually abused in overcrowded apartments while their parents are trying to find housing. The shelter and overflow hotel system offers families a critical safety net from battling the storm of poverty. But obviously sheltering families in the same room in rec centers poses safety risk unless privacy barriers can be created. We know the reliance on this expensive side of the continuum is not sustainable, and it's a lot cheaper to house families in shelter, than shelter them, and it's certainly better for children. Therefore, we recommend more case management support and data analysis around the ERAP program with the goal of keeping families housed to prevent homelessness in the first place. Year-round access for Priority 1 families, which is important for any civilized city because homelessness does not have a season. People become evicted, experience domestic violence, and lose jobs year-round, and it makes no sense to place a disproportionate burden on the hypothermia season. Residency requirements already prevent out-of-state families from showing up here to seek shelter, and a lot of families I know end up moving to PG County because they know it's cheaper to find housing anyway. Although I must say that utilizing the hotels in Maryland, I believe, was a wise choice. And the hotel manager who I spoke with was raving about our families. He said 85% of the families in the hotels are model model residents, model guests. And I was very impressed with the arrangements that DHS and the hotel made to shuttle families to where they needed to be. So I think it was the best solution. And I don't want to overreact to Maryland not loving the solution. Since vouchers offer one of the surest ways of ending homelessness, we would also like to see the city continue to invest in the local rent supplement program. To avoid the perception of a shelter incentive, I think more can be done. Perhaps we could look at how families enter the permanent supportive housing program with their vulnerability index, and maybe we can develop a similar way to prioritize need so families can access LRSP through the rapid rehousing program, perhaps, without having to go through the shelter system first. And we also, of course, want to see a greater commitment to more investment in affordable housing for low-income residents, as we've talked about, to preserve the racial and economic justice in our city. Yes, we want police officers and teachers to afford to live here, but what about store clerks, cleaning staff, and child care workers? Shouldn't people who work here be able to afford to live here? And bottom line, we want to offer our support to DHS and City Council. There are a lot of private partners like us who are available for free to help weather this storm. We're happy to provide activity kits to the kids living in hotels, and we've made great relationships with the hotel managers to do that. We're signing up all of our kids for the Summer Youth Employment Program at DC General that we serve, and partnering with DOES to come into the shelter to do that to all the kids with all the kids next year. There are other organizations that can help as well if only asked upon, and we look forward to working with you to build a city where no child